Right, so before we crack on with the video, I have to show you this. It's my Cornetto trilogy t-shirt. And I thought I'd put this t-shirt on to commemorate the fact that I'm reviewing Edgar Wright's latest film. But anyway, back into the video. Last Night in Soho. So Last Night in Soho is Edgar Wright's latest motion picture, and it's the first one that we've seen from him since Baby Driver in 2017. I always look forward to an Edgar Wright film because he's probably, in my opinion, one of the best British film directors in recent memory. I just love his visionary style, his approach to storytelling, his screenwriting, and the actors that are in his films as well. I think every single film that he's done so far, they've all been very, very good. So there was a lot of expectation going into this one because looking at Last Night in Soho, it seemed very different than anything he's done before in terms of style and not to mention genre. I mean, we've seen a small fraction of what Edgar Wright can do in horror, as we saw and found out in Shaun of the Dead, but this one just seems totally different and seems a whole lot more serious. But I will admit I did have some reservations about this film because I thought, is it going to be as good as some of the other films that he's done in the past? And you know what? It really pulled out the bag with this one, went really bold and made some risks, and it worked, and I thoroughly enjoyed the film. Last Night in Soho follows aspiring fashion designer Eloise from Cornwall, who travels to central London to build her career. However, she soon learns that it may not be all it's made out to be, as she has visions from 1960s London, in which she encounters Sandy, who is a wannabe singer. So right there and then, you can just imagine that this film is going to include some things that invoke a sense of beauty, which of course is the fashion industry, but because it's a horror story, how that can also be twisted into something terrifying, and you got that feeling quite quickly. And at least at the beginning, it follows a very traditional Edgar Wright kind of style, where the protagonist is living in a quiet area, they move somewhere, and then when they get there, they find out it's not the same place as they thought it was going to be, or previously thought. Somewhat like Hot Fuzz and The World's End, for example. And you sometimes find with Edgar Wright's films, and this one is no different, that he often pays homage to British culture and certain places. Some are fictional, some are genuinely real. But through those representations, he adds his own twists and turns in the story that are deemed exaggerated, but from a cinematic point of view are very creative. And you get that in Last Night in Soho because of the surroundings of London. London is represented as something that's very haunting. London does have a very dark and bleak history, but in this one, it has so many different strands to it that is almost like a fancy fairy tale story and a slasher at the same time. It blends different subgenres and ideas in the film, and you can largely see that through the visuals. It is probably the best looking Edgar Wright film that we've had so far because it really does reflect the glamour of London, but also the dark side of it as well. It's particularly the cinematography that allows us to differentiate between 1960s London and present day London, and you got that through the tone of the sequences and also the colours as well. The colours are a contributing factor to the visual representation of the story in the film, but they're also symbolic in how we understand the characters because of course red is known for being romantic, but it's also known for violence, and blue is one for cold, and you get that because of course it's set at night, and also green because there's a lot of jealousy and a lot of anger towards people. And as a large portion of the film was during the swinging 60s, you did get a wild reflection of that era in London via the visuals, and the editing was sublime as well, and it's almost like a trademark in an Edgar Wright film, and it particularly plays a significant part not just visually but in terms of character relationships, most notably between Sadie and Eloise. You'll know what I mean when you watch it, but just the attention to detail and how clean the editing was in some of the sequences was absolutely extraordinary. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets a nomination at the Oscars for Best Editing as well as cinematography because that's how brilliant it was in that respect. And I think the soundtrack is worth a mention as well, as it was just as brilliant as the cinematography and the editing in terms of capturing the tone of the story. So in terms of production and narrative, Last Night in Soho does have a large number of different plot devices and subgenres in it, like slasher, like fairy tale drama, like crime, like mystery, and the list goes on. I'm sure I'll probably notice a few more, and you really understood that through the visuals, and not to mention the performances as well. Now, as opposed to a lot of horror films that we've seen over the years, the characters in Last Night in Soho are presented in a lot more depth, because when you think of horror characters, it's easy to just conjure up one that just, you know, kills people and it does this and it does that, but there's no kind of real reason and there's no real motive behind it. And with some of these characters, and not just the villains but the heroes as well, you start to understand them more as well. It's not a very straightforward story in that respect, so the characters are a lot more defined in this one, and the performances from all the cast members are absolutely brilliant. Aspiring young actress Thomasin McKenzie plays Eloise, and we previously saw her in Jojo Rabbit, but I absolutely loved her performance in this one, and it was her real breakthrough. Because she was very reserved in terms of building relationships with people, and she just liked time to herself, and she was living with her nan, and you got to understand that she was this very shy teenage girl, and she is a reserved girl, but when things start to happen in London and she has these visions of Sandy, the real her comes out. And Mackenzie's performance was absolutely brilliant, and I have a feeling that she'll go on to become someone truly special in the film industry. Now, Anya Taylor-Joy's role in this film really caught my attention because I remember recently watching her in the Netflix miniseries The Queen's Gambit. The fact that this one could be another quirky character, and I thought to myself, having seen the trailer and everything of this film, it's going to be a very unusual performance from Anya Taylor-Joy, and I look forward to seeing what she does with the character of Sandy. But despite Taylor-Joy's role is leading on the same level as Mackenzie's performance, Taylor-Joy takes a different approach to her performance in comparison to Mackenzie, because Sandy is a character from the swinging 60s, and she's a singer and also dancer as well. So while there is dialogue between Sandy and various characters in the film, a large portion of her performance is dominated from body language and figural expression, and you really felt that, particularly in those illusion sequences that she has with Eloise, aka Ellie. But yes, Anya Taylor-Joy was absolutely brilliant as well, and I think she's another one who's young and who is going on to bigger and better things in the film industry. And also Matt Smith plays a significant role in this film as well as Jack, and as popular as he is, having previously been in The Crown as Prince Philip and also the Doctor in Doctor Who, I still don't think he gets enough credit for his transparency in his acting as a performer, because to an extent he still plays that middle class guy from London, but the motives of this character are very different than a lot of performances that we've seen from him in recent years. And I really liked his character, particularly when he's on screen with Anya Taylor-Joy. And veteran actor Terence Stamp makes an appearance in this film as well, as does the late Diana Rigg, who sadly passed away in September 2020. And it was a terrific send-off for her, and her performance was absolutely top-notch. So rest in peace, Diana Rigg. There were certain aspects where it did remind me a lot of it being a traditional Edgar Wright film, but I think what was really fundamental about it was that it really kind of balanced so many different genres together to make it one film. And for me, it didn't feel overstuffed, it didn't feel overwhelming, it didn't feel out of place. It worked really, really well, and that's what I appreciated about this film. And also Last Night in Soho shows the other side of what horror means, because in normal life fashion is deemed as attractive, and it ultimately showed for me that fashion and putting a dress on or a suit or whatever is just a mask that hides away from what people really are inside. Their real selves come out from their personality, not their image. And it is that notion that plays a significant part in how the characters are developed in this film. What did you think of Last Night in Soho? How do you think it is ranked among other Edgar Wright films? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you did go on to enjoy this video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more, and have a notification bell tick so you're notified when I upload a new video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, everybody.